I'm Hugh Downs, and this is Nightline. High winds and rains from Hurricane Alicia are lashing the Texas Gulf Coast tonight. We'll look at the storm's progress and the increasing threat it poses, and we'll talk with the head of the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Also tonight, the government's plan to use paraquat, a controversial herbicide, in an effort to wipe out marijuana fields in 40 states. Now, no one doubts that paraquat kills marijuana plants. Some fear it will kill humans as well. We'll talk with people on both sides of that issue and with a man who knows the illicit marijuana industry from the inside.
This is ABC News Nightline.
As an example of something we take for granted and to show how difficult communications are during a hurricane-sized storm, we're not able at this time to bring you a couple of reports that we wanted to bring you out of the Houston-Galveston area in Texas. We expect to be able to do that a little later on the program, but for now I'd like to turn to our next topic on Nightline. The question is, which is the most dangerous villain? Now, for the federal government, the enemy is marijuana. Growing it is a $10 billion illegal industry. Some say that it may be the third largest cash crop in the United States today. The Reagan administration wants to stamp out marijuana with a herbicide known as paraquat. But paraquat is known to be poisonous to humans, and the government's plans to spray it in some 40 states has created a major controversy. John Martin tells us where the dispute now stands.
It was back in this area over here, and it's in a half a mile of here.
If you could have seen this field a week ago, today, you would have never dreamed that this is the same field today. It's just unbelievable what it's done.
The spray hasn't bothered anything around here, the dogs, chickens, cats, garden, or anything. I can't understand what's all the fuss about.
The fuss is about paraquat and a federal plan to spray one of the world's deadliest and most effective herbicides on one of the country's biggest cash crops, marijuana. It happened last Friday here in the mountains of North Georgia, about 100 miles from Atlanta. A helicopter from the Drug Enforcement Administration sprayed paraquat on patches of marijuana discovered inside the Chattahoochee National Forest.
From this county flows approximately 40 to 50% of the drinking water for the total population of the state of Georgia. I drink it any other time, but I won't drink it now, not since they sprayed up here.
Today, some of the people who live just outside the forest section that was sprayed were complaining that they'd had only 15 minutes warning to get away, that some trees and crops seemed damaged, that they felt betrayed.
I wasn't angry, but I was upset then that they would not put our well-being first. But, and I also felt that because we are few in number and maybe that we're just little country people, they thought we didn't have enough sense to know what was going on.
But today, the federal drug agents moved to Tennessee, looking for more marijuana, for more spraying, probably tomorrow. Part of a program they believe is safe and necessary in at least 40 states across the country, which have signed up to participate.
It's much more economically feasible if you send ground troops in, ground agents in with paraquat on their back or with machetes or whatever. It could take all day, and you need an army if the site were rough enough terrain. This is very cost-effective. It's very rapid. We can do it in 15, 20 minutes.
It has the blessings of the environmental standards. It's not as toxic as a lot of people lead you to believe. I didn't have any reason to say, well, the governor of Georgia is opposed to paraquat.
Paraquat, according to Dr. Edward Block, a University of Florida lung specialist, is one of the world's worst poisons. It can kill if only small amounts are swallowed, inhaled, or spilled on the skin.
So the battle has been joined. This North Georgia group signed petitions and got a federal judge to issue a temporary injunction.
For now, we have stopped the federal government from spraying paraquat here in the North Georgia mountains.
It applies only to one small part of Georgia. We'll probably go back into Georgia, conceivably, if not this year, certainly next, and spray some more.
The lines are forming here in the South for a battle that could soon affect much of the country and the health of more than the estimated 30 million Americans who now smoke marijuana.
I'd rather that they would spray than to for them to raise the marijuana and it be sold to our children.
I certainly am not for it being legalized. I have 4 children, and their health and well-being is the most important thing in my life. And that's why I oppose to the spraying.
I'm John Martin for Nightline in Georgia.
Marijuana has been the subject of a national debate for many years, but Americans know a great deal less about the substance the government wants to use as a weapon against it. Cheryl McCarthy has a report on paraquat, what it is, what it does.
This innocent-looking vial contains one of the most powerful and deadly herbicides in use today, paraquat. Humans who are exposed to even small amounts of paraquat can suffer sickness or death. The chemical attacks the lungs, causing them to swell and resulting in suffocation. It also poisons the liver and kidneys. The herbicide itself is sprayed over the marijuana fields, shriveling and drying the plants in hours. The spraying has sparked fears that marijuana smokers here could suffer lung damage from paraquat poisoning. But federal drug enforcement officials say there is no scientific proof of that. On the positive side, some say that paraquat could revolutionize the farm industry, eliminating the need for difficult and costly plowing. It destroys the unwanted foliage and creates a rich organic mulch or seed bed for crops like wheat, corn, soybeans, and potatoes. Already used as a defoliant on more than 10 million acres of American farmland, paraquat is providing a much-needed boost to a financially troubled agricultural industry. Cheryl McCarthy for Nightline.
When we return, we'll discuss the danger of paraquat to human beings with a White House drug policy spokesman and with a specialist in environmental medicine. We'll also have a report on today's big drug bust against marijuana fields in California. And we'll talk with a man who's familiar with the cultivation of marijuana fields like the ones raided today. Our topic, the government's plan to use the herbicide paraquat in a national program to eradicate marijuana fields. And with us now live in our Washington Bureau to discuss this issue is Dr. Carlton Turner, a special assistant to President Reagan in charge of the White House Drug Abuse Office, and Dr. Marion Moses, a specialist in environmental medicine. Welcome to you both. And before we get into the effects on humans, let me ask you, Dr. Turner, isn't this spraying operation a little bit like attacking the tide with a broom?
I don't really think so, Hugh. What we're looking at is we're looking at ways to eradicate a narcotic plant that's creating tremendous problems for our society. And I think the real issue there is not paraquat. I think the real issue is marijuana. You spray 10.7 million acres with it, 4 million pounds a year. No one files an injunction. You use less than 1.5 pounds on approximately 2.5 acres in Georgia, and you get an injunction filed. The key thing is the injunction is only good for the national forest. It didn't cover the whole state of Georgia because it prohibit the farmers from using it in their soybeans.
Now, you mixed two figures there. I just want to clarify something. The amount per acre comes out to about 1/2 pound.
That's about right.
Agricultural use. Is that the concentration that's used in the attempt to eradicate marijuana?
Yes, Hugh, we used basically the same concentration, and we used it under a very strenuous on-site visit to ensure that the environment was protected. We used it with a helicopter, not like people classically think of a fixed-wing aircraft coming in spraying. We hovered over about 20 feet above the ground, and we dropped the material directly in on it. We control the overspray to the site designed. Paraquat is photodegradable, it is biodegradable, it doesn't leach out in the soil, and the growers use tremendous amounts of herbicides, they use insecticides and everything else that leach out into society.
Okay, but this stuff is toxic, isn't it, or it wouldn't kill growing things?
Hugh, that's correct. We don't live in a sterile society. Every herbicide is toxic. Every insecticide is toxic. And the insecticides that you and I and the rest of America has under their sinks is responsible for 20 deaths the year we had the latest statistics in 80. So we have a society that has toxins all around us, and we have to make a decision. The benefit outweigh the risk.
Dr. Moses, let me ask you, paraquat is used agriculturally rather widely, so what is the big deal, the danger of it?
Well, I think the big problem with paraquat, and I have felt that paraquat should not be used agriculturally for many years, the reason being there is no antidote. There is no known antidote if a person has become poisoned with this chemical. And there are many, many, unfortunately, all over the world, deaths that have been reported, accidental deaths, many of them in children, from a teaspoonful of a 2.5% solution, in which once the person takes enough of this to be toxic, they may seem to do very well in the beginning, and in fact the renal and the liver problems that were mentioned by an earlier person on the show, those tend to resolve. What does not resolve is the lung problem, a rapidly progressive pulmonary fibrosis in which the person dies. Now that you can say, well, we're not using such high doses, it's only agriculturally used, and if you want to speak to that later, but I think that's the single biggest problem with paraquat, that there is no antidote to poisoning, accidental poisoning.
And the DEA has said that 99.8% of it is gone by the time one would smoke a cigarette, but what happens with that 0.2%?
Well, that's the next question that I think has to be considered. They always say, it has always been said that workers have been examined, either workers in Malaya or other workers have been looked at, or people who have had exposure to this, and we don't see any evidence of harm. That's one question, maybe not acute, but what about chronic exposure to low levels over a long period of time? And frankly, we don't have good epidemiology on that. That has not been properly tested, and we don't know if there are decrements in lung function, and there is some evidence, not published, that suggests that there may be decrements of lung function in humans from spray exposures. The other thing important about paraquat is that it's rapidly absorbed through the skin, and there have been deaths in sprayers. A report from Ireland in a sprayer using it agriculturally. He did have a severe dermatitis, so it is not necessary to ingest it, as some have thought. I also think, if I may make another point, when we're talking about such a toxic chemical as paraquat, if the government is going to get into it in a big way and use a lot of it, this means more exposure, more chances for accidents, all sorts of things, and I think we have to consider that.
Dr. Turner, I want to ask you, we were told by the government that dioxin was safe until it turned out that that wasn't the case. How can we be sure that paraquat is going to...
Let's focus in on paraquat. Paraquat has been on the streets of the United States on marijuana containing paraquat since 1976. It has been coming in every year from Mexico, and even though we've tried diligently to find a particular case where there's lung problems, there's never been a case because 99.8% of the paraquat decomposes in the smoking process.
All right, but what happened to Scott Wilson, a 25-year-old with a celebrated lung transplant case, and he finally died?
We all agree we don't live in a sterile society. In those cases where you find ingestion is something that Dr. Moses said I think needs to be clarified. For oral ingestion, bentonite clay is an antidote, but you've got to get to it very quick. But if you go out and you don't follow the label instructions on that herbicide, you're asking for problems like you ask for problems on any herbicide. One celebrated case was spraying it in an aerosol in a closed greenhouse with no protective clothing, no respirator. That is asking for trouble. Now, what we're doing with the spray techniques we use particle size that are greater than 10 microns, which means that it's very difficult to get down the nasal passage. We also use a heavier spray that drops it right where it is. Now, there's another thing that needs to be corrected. We have never said we were going to spray in 40 states. We said we would spray in federal property where we made on-site visits, and those on-site visits showed that the use of paraquat would be safe and effective.
Okay, thank you, both of you. We want to come back to this in a moment, but right now, while the federal government sprays marijuana with paraquat in the East, authorities have launched a concerted new crackdown in California. We'll have a report. And later, an update on Hurricane Alicia and its assault on the Texas Gulf Coast.